Muito bom dia, meus amigos. Hoje, 11 de março de 2024, pelo horário de Brasília, agora são os 11h55 da manhã. Então, vamos acompanhar aí o momento da separação, né, da liberação, então, da Dragon Endurance, aí, então, na Estação Espacial Internacional, aí, com a tripulação da CREW-7. Hoje, então, iniciando, né, esse procedimento de retorno, né, para a Terra. Agora, mais cedo, tivemos aí então o momento do fechamento da escotilha da nave Dragon, né? E agora aí vamos acompanhar então, o momento da desacoplagem na Estação Espacial Internacional, que está programada aí para acontecer por volta da 12h20 pelo horário de Brasília. Lembrando que o splashdown, né, o toque na água, está previsto para acontecer amanhã, né, na parte da manhã, com a nossa transmissão iniciando por volta aí das 5h40 da manhã. Então não percam. E lembrando que logo mais, também a partir das 10 horas da noite, vamos acompanhar a nova tentativa para o lançamento da Kairos, né, aí da Space One, né, primeiro lançamento privado lá no Japão. Então, a partir das 10 horas, vamos estar juntos de novo para a segunda tentativa, então, aí do veículo Kairos. Na madrugada de hoje também tivemos a missão Starlink lá na Califórnia, né, com 23 satélites. O lançamento foi às 1h09 da manhã. Também à noite, né, no dia 10, ontem, tivemos também missão Starlink na Flórida, com 23 satélites também, que o lançamento foi no horário às 25 da noite. E agora estamos aguardando então contato com Houston, lá no Centro Espacial da NASA, para a sala de controle da Estação Espacial Internacional, né, para a gente então acompanhar aí o momento da desacoplagem da nave Dragon com a tripulação da CREW-7, né, que está deixando então hoje a Estação Espacial Internacional após 6 meses em órbita. Lembrando também que no dia 21 de março, né, na semana que vem aí, teremos a nova tripulação pelo lado russo, né, a Soyuz MS-25. Vamos transmitir ao vivo também. Lembrando, reforçando mais uma vez, então, que ontem nos Estados Unidos iniciou então o horário de verão. Então agora as nossas transmissões, né, sempre vão começar agora 1 hora aí de diferença no caso, com o horário do leste, né, e 4 horas de diferença em relação ao Pacífico. Estamos aguardando então contato com o Centro Espacial Johnson, né, onde fica então a sala de controle da Estação Espacial Internacional em Houston, né, para acompanharmos então aí o momento da desacoplagem da nave Dragon. Lembrando que a tripulação da CREW-7 então é formada pela seguinte tripulação, né? A astronauta da NASA, Jasmin Moghbeli, comandante da missão, astronauta da ESA, né? O Andreas Mogensen, da Dinamarca, astronauta da JAXA, Satoshi Furukawa, e o cosmonauta russo Konstantin Borisov. Então essa aí é a tripulação então aí composta da CREW-7. Deixa hoje então a Estação Espacial Internacional. Lembrando que esta missão também temos aí com a transmissão em conjunto com a Spacex, ESA e a Rússia, né? Então, Spacex aí já também iniciando os seus trabalhos agora. Mas vamos acompanhar aqui também pela NASA, né? Já que a transmissão é igual. Meio-dia, pelo horário de Brasília. O horário então da desacoplagem prevista aí para 12h20. Daqui a 20 minutinhos. Estamos iniciando então a nossa transmissão em conjunto agora com a SpaceX, NASA e ESA e e o Cosmos. E também a JAXA, né? Não sei se a JAXA também vai transmitir também. Lembrando então que o Splashdown amanhã, hein? Amanhã então teremos o Splashdown. Amanhã na parte da manhã. E aí, portanto, iniciamos a nossa transmissão oficial juntamente com a NASA para acompanharmos então o momento da desacoplagem da CREW-7 na Estação Espacial Internacional. Siga o nosso canal aqui no YouTube e também nas redes sociais, né? Já ultrapassamos a marca de 1.290 inscritos, né? Estamos chegando aí a 1.300 no canal aqui. E também siga o nosso canal nas redes sociais, lá no X e também no Instagram. Os links na descrição. E aí estamos vendo então a sala de controle lá na Califórnia. Aí onde estamos aí acompanhando o momento então da desacoplagem então da Dragon Endurance.
It is Monday, March 11th, here at Spacex headquarters
então,
in Hawthorne, California.
Né, deixando, então, hoje a Estação Espacial Internacional
após 6 meses at 8:20 a.m. Pacific Time or 11:20 a.m. Eastern Time with our CREW-7 astronauts, including NASA's Jasmin Moghbeli, European Space Agency astronaut Andreas,
né, foto então da
Japan
tripulação da CREW-7,
astronaut Satoshi
né,
Furukawa,
que estão deixando hoje aí a Estação Espacial Internacional. Hoje mais cedo tivemos então aí o momento do fechamento da escotilha, da Dragon, e agora estamos aguardando então o momento da desacoplagem na Estação Espacial. Lembrando que logo mais então teremos aí o momento da segunda tentativa de lançamento então da Kairos a partir das 22 horas.
To watch the live coverage of Dragon completing its 7th official long-duration mission from NASA's commercial Crew program. CREW-7 is the 7th NASA Crew rotation mission and 9th NASA flight with astronauts to the space station, and that's including Demo 2 and Crew-8, as part of NASA's commercial Crew program. For those of you following along, you'll know that Crew-8 just arrived last week to the space station and will be taking over for Crew-7, who's now headed home. My name is Jessie Anderson, a manufacturing engineering manager here at SpaceX, and joining me today from NASA Communications is Sandra Jones.
Thanks so much for having me, Jessie. It's really great to be here. Now, once Dragon departs space station today, the crew's flight home is expected to last around 18.5 hours. Shortly after separation, Dragon will use its Draco engines to thrust away from the station in a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers.
Então, para quem está chegando agora na nossa transmissão, estamos ao vivo acompanhando neste momento a saída então da nave Dragon Endurance na Estação Espacial Internacional. Lembrando que amanhã, então, a partir das 5h25 da manhã, vamos acompanhar então a chegada então, da retorno e o splashdown.
In that time, trunk separation, closure of the nose cone, a deorbit burn, deployment of the drogue and main parachutes,
também no dia 12 teremos aí o lançamento da Rocket Lab. E na parte da manhã, por volta das 11 horas da manhã, o lançamento previsto, nossa transmissão e já começar então por volta das 10h40 da manhã.
5:50 a.m. Eastern Time or 2:50 a.m. Pacific Time, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels.
Today, on board the International Space Station is the Expedition 70 crew, being led by Roscosmos cosmonaut and current Space Station commander, Oleg Kononenko.
Lembrando que agora, então, quem está comandando a Estação Espacial Internacional é o Cosmonauta Russo, Oleg Kononenko.
Requiring no action from the crew on board. NASA astronaut Laurel O'Hara
a passagem então foi dada então para o Oleg. E ele agora então o comandante da Estação Espacial Internacional.
Jasmin Moghbeli from inside Dragon. Mission controls in Houston and Hawthorne will also help to back them up.
15 minutos então para a desacoplagem. Estamos aí então aguardando as imagens lá da Estação Espacial Internacional para o momento então da desacoplagem. Estamos agora ao vivo em Houston, no
welcome
Centro
to the
Espacial
International Space
Johnson.
Station Flight Control Room here
Aí na
in
sala de
Houston,
controle, então,
Texas.
aí
We
da
are monitoring the
Estação
departure of
Espacial
CREW-7 this morning,
Internacional.
and teams are standing by again for the go-no-go poll coming up here shortly. We are working and monitoring.
Você
Earlier
acompanha
this
todos os
morning, we saw
detalhes
the
aqui
hatch
ao
closure
vivo
of Crew Dragon
para vocês.
Endurance. All 4 crew members are now inside, suited up, and getting ready for their ride home. Of course, we will remain in these integrated operations during the time.
Ground is go for undocking and departure. Undock sequence start is at 1515 Zulu, and our final configurations for undock are complete and nominal. Please confirm you are ready and that visors are down prior to the sequence start.
Então aí estamos aí dando sequência para a desacoplagem.
Endurance copies all. We will be prepared at 1515 and we'll give you a call when visors are down.
Então aí já foi dada então autorização para o início então da sequência da desacoplagem lá na Estação Espacial Internacional.
Copy, Dragon. Sorry for the miss on the call sign there. And then finally, GPS-2 related cautions may be expected,
Olha que o splashdown então vai
and they do not
acontecer
require a crew
amanhã,
action.
se tudo correr bem aí na desacoplagem. É o splashdown aí com a tripulação da CREW-7 da Dragon Endurance. Irá acontecer amanhã, no início da manhã, dia 12.
So we're continuing to hear
Que a
some
nossa transmissão
communications
então
from
para
the
amanhã
ground
irá
teams here
começar
in
por
Mission
volta
Control
das
Houston, as well as the
5h25 da manhã.
core, the crew operations resource engineer in Hawthorne, California. The Capcom here today is Amy Dill, and the flight director on console in Mission Control Houston is Judd Freeling. So since Crew-8's arrival just last week, we've had a busy
Meio-dia e
week during this
7,
handover. No, over
13
the last
minutos aí
several
para a
days, the astronauts
desacoplagem.
worked to unpack Dragon, pack Dragon, I should say,
Lembrando que
full of the
estamos
cargo that will
ao vivo
return
então e
with them.
acompanhando
And along with the
o
crew,
método da
Dragon's going to be bringing back
desacoplagem
some of that critical
aí na
science,
Estação Espacial
including samples for
Internacional.
continuing human research, additionally some hardware and other items. Earlier today, Jasmin Moghbeli and Andy Mogensen worked to remove some of the cold bags and the polar freezers. These store cold research samples and scientific experiments.
Estamos
Those are now
aguardando
in
então as
Dragon
imagens
Endurance
lá da
underneath
estação.
the crew's seats. All of this critical science and cargo is offloaded after we get the crew out of
Dragon.
the spacecraft following splashdown.
Lembrando que agora então o novo comandante da Estação Espacial é o
Just a few hours of that return. The crew also took some time to get into their Spacex suits this morning. They had those unpacked and are now ready for the journey home,
nas mãos aí
totally
do
suited and
Andreas
seated.
Mogensen,
Since
da
getting the hatches
Dinamarca,
closed, all 4
e foi
astronauts are
passado
in
então
their
agora
seats.
para
We're standing
o
by for
Oleg
undocking.
Kononenko.
And additionally, teams at NASA and SpaceX have been preparing for
Mais cedo
undocking.
tivemos
They've been
então o
conducting
fechamento da
checkouts of the
escotilha
Dragon spacecraft
da
and space
Dragon
station
Endurance.
systems. Now, one of the items that these teams look for
Estamos só aguardando então
for
aí o
these
momento da
splashdown
desacoplagem.
opportunities are weather opportunities. We want to make sure that the crew aboard Dragon and the
Não
teams
se
who
esqueça de
recover them
deixar o
have the
like aí na
best conditions
transmissão,
possible for a
seguir o
safe and
canal
speedy
aqui no
pickup.
YouTube,
We've got a final
também de
no-go/no-go
de seguir o
poll
canal nas
coming
redes
up
sociais lá
in
no
just a few
X
minutes.
e também no Instagram. Os links se encontram aí na descrição.
That go-no-go poll will give us an opportunity for both NASA and SpaceX teams to make their final call for Dragon to depart station. That's one of the many checkpoints during the return that will continue all the way up until just before the deorbit
Lembrando que o
burn.
horário
That gives
inicialmente
the
era
mission
para
managers
meio-dia e
multiple
5,
chances
né?
to
Mas foi
assess the weather
alterado
at the
para
splashdown
meio-dia
zones
e
and make
20.
sure everything is lining up before Dragon departs. Now, again, we've been watching weather over the last few days. We have a great opportunity tomorrow morning, and these astronauts, we expect to see them splash down early tomorrow morning, less than 24 hours from now. Again, we are live here in Mission Control Houston, just standing by for that go, no-go poll. Again,
Estamos
all 4
aguardando então
astronauts
aí
and
o
3 astronauts,
go
1
no go,
cosmonaut
né,
are
para
in Dragon
a
Endurance,
desacoplagem.
still docked to the International Space
Está
Station,
previsto
expecting
então para
undocking to
meio-dia
come
e
at
20.
about 11:20 a.m. Eastern Time, 10:20 a.m. Central Time.
Lembrando também que no dia 12 teremos aí a missão com a Rocket Lab. Transmissão iniciando a partir das 10h40 da manhã. No dia 14 também teremos aí o terceiro voo de teste integrado com o Starship. Nós estamos aguardando a confirmação então das agências reguladoras, né, para firmar tudo direitinho aí para que tenha lançamento. 12h10 pelo horário de Brasília. Você está assistindo então ao canal WillPTV. O nome então é William Pessoa. Estamos aí acompanhando juntos o momento então da desacoplagem da Dragon Endurance. Faltando então 10 minutos para a desacoplagem. Lembrando que dia 21 de março teremos então a missão Soyuz MS-25 com a nova tripulação pelo lado russo na Estação Espacial Internacional.
View, and they've taken some pictures to share with us. So these are from the space station. The space station is 250 miles above Earth. They're too far away to make things out like cars, people, or buildings, but they can see other landmarks around the world. And they have these long camera lenses they can use to help.
E dia 8 de abril teremos o eclipse total solar aí, que vai aí cobrir os países Canadá, Estados Unidos e México.
And its suburbs just across the Guanabara Bay. Toward the bottom is the 8.25-mile long President Costa e Silva Bridge linking Rio de Janeiro with the city of Niterói.
Aí estamos aí a foto do Rio de Janeiro, né? Vocês viram aí agora há pouco, né? Aí é de Guanabara, Rio de Janeiro, e Niterói, vista da Estação Espacial Internacional.
Our last photo for the morning, the crew captured the city lights of the Denver, Colorado area on February 29th. If you look in the top left, you'll see an aurora which crowns a portion of Canada. And of course, we do get imagery from satellites that take photos of Earth, but the International Space Station is really unique in these viewing opportunities because astronauts and cosmonauts can tell scientists on the ground what they're observing and what stands out in real time. So what we're observing here in Mission Control Houston today, again, CREW-7 undocking scheduled for 10:20 a.m. Central Time. That coming up in just about 10 minutes, I'm going to send it back to Jesse and Sarah in Hawthorne.
E a Baía de
Thanks,
Guanabara.
Leah. And those pictures were pretty awesome. It's always cool to see what the astronauts' point of view is when they're on the International Space Station.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite was the one of Denver, Colorado. You know, Denver is the mile-high city, and right now the International Space Station is actually flying 263 miles.
SpaceX copies, visors down.
Estamos aguardando então as imagens da Estação Espacial Internacional para o momento então da desacoplagem.
And so that call out up to the commander of Dragon, Jasmin Moghbeli, NASA astronaut, just letting the ground know that her visors are down as well as her crewmates. That's one more milestone that they check off ahead of undocking here. We are expecting undocking at 8:20 a.m. Pacific this morning, so coming up here in less than 10
minutes.
E
os especialistas da missão são o Satoshi Furukawa,
and again, at the moment, Dragon is in its final configuration before undocking, and we've already had the go-no-go poll, and we are go for proceeding with the undocking.
And just like during its approach to the International Space Station, Dragon's departure in orbit is designed to be fully autonomous, which requires no action from the crew on board. Departure is typically a little bit faster and easier since the crew doesn't have to stop at any of the waypoints, like when we see a vehicle arrive and dock to the International Space Station.
Once the undocking sequence is complete, Dragon will use its Draco engines
Sequência
to
então da
thrust away from the
desacoplagem
station in a series
concluída.
of 5 departure burns, which are carefully choreographed maneuvers that will increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. From there, a phasing burn will
Lembrando então
place
que amanhã a
Dragon
partir
on a
das
trajectory back to
5h25 da
Earth.
manhã teremos então o momento do
So
retorno
again, we
e
did
o
have that
splashdown da
go-no-go poll
Dragon.
take place a few minutes ago. Everything is on time and going smoothly, looking like we're going to have a great undocking this morning.
Estamos então acompanhando tudo aqui ao vivo. Esse é o momento que vai acontecer amanhã, né? E nós vamos ver também.
So again, we are just a few minutes away from our targeted undock this morning. We're planning to have that undock occur at 8:20 a.m. Pacific. And the journey home will be not quite 24 hours, but the crew will splash down off the coast of Florida early tomorrow morning. Before they depart the International Space Station, let's take a moment to get to know the crew we're bringing home tomorrow. Lieutenant Colonel Jasmin Moghbeli hails from Baldwin, New York, and earned a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and a master's degree in aerospace engineering from the Naval Postgraduate School. She also graduated with honors from the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School. As an AH-1W Super Cobra pilot and Marine Corps test pilot, she has flown more than 150 combat missions. In all, she accrued 2,000 hours of flight time in more than 25 different aircraft.
Undock sequence commanded.
Então, sequência então aí da desacoplagem. Iniciando. Neste momento.
And we did just hear that call up to the crew that the undock sequence has begun.
Então, nesse momento estamos iniciando então a sequência da desacoplagem.
So to continue talking about the commander of Dragon today, NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli.
Umbilicals are demated, nominal.
Normal, tudo normal.
And we are hearing that the umbilicals have retracted between Dragon and the International Space Station. So the next milestone that we'll be looking for is for those sets of
Estamos
hooks
acompanhando
to
ao
fully
vivo
retract.
neste momento,
There's
então, o momento
two
da
sets of
desacoplagem da
6 hooks, so
Dragon
12 hooks in all.
Endurance.
And once those hooks have separated, then there will be a short thruster firing that occurs of the Draco engines to help push Dragon back away from the International Space Station. So we are in a night pass right now, so we may not have the best views of that undocking as it occurs, but we will continue, of course, to provide live updates as we hear them. And so back to Jasmin. In all, she has accrued 2,000 hours of flight time in more than 25 different aircraft. At the time of her selection as an astronaut, Moghbeli was testing H-1 helicopters and serving as the Quality Assurance and Avionics Officer for VMX-1. She's also the proud mom of twin girls. With this mission, she will have logged an estimated 199 days in space during her first flight, including 6 hours and 42 minutes during her first spacewalk. Today, she is the commander of CREW-7.
Sitting next to Jasmin is
piloto,
pilot Andreas Mogensen.
Mogensen.
This is Mogensen's second trip to the space
Astronauta da
station. His
ESA,
first was as the flight engineer
Dinamarca.
for the ESA Iris mission in 2015. He was born in Copenhagen, Denmark, and graduated with an international baccalaureate from the Copenhagen International School, a master's degree in aeronautical engineering from Imperial College London, and a doctorate in aerospace engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. In 2015, Mogensen became the first Danish person to go to space and currently is serving as the European Astronaut Liaison Officer to NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. With this mission, he will have logged 209 days in space across 2 flights.
In the role of mission specialist
E aí
is
temos
Japan
o
Aerospace
Japão, né?
Exploration
Nosso
Agency
astronauta da
astronaut
JAXA, Satoshi
Furukawa.
Furukawa.
Furukawa's interest in space began when he was just 5 years old and saw the Apollo 11 moon landing on TV. He was also a fan of the Japanese.
First set of hooks are open and nominal.
Tudo indo aí de acordo com o cronograma. 12 pelo horário de Brasília, agora são
And we did just hear
meio-dia
the
e
call out that that
18.
first set of hooks has
Tudo indo
successfully
normal.
opened.
Na
Everything
sequência
is
estão aí
going
até o
on
momento.
track perfectly smoothly
Estamos
this
aguardando
morning.
só as imagens
Again,
lá da
there's 2
Estação
sets of
Espacial
hooks, each in
Internacional.
a group of 6, so 12 in all.
E tá vendo
So
então o
halfway
momento da
through, and we'll
desacoplagem
continue
da
to monitor
Dragon
those
Endurance.
hooks opening as we continue to tell you about the rest of the crew. So Furukawa was also a fan of the Japanese TV space hero Ultra 7. His professional career began as a medical doctor, but after seeing a news report about Japan auditioning for new astronauts to do science experiments on the space station, he decided to apply. He was selected by the National Space Development Agency of Japan to be an astronaut candidate in 1999, and his first mission to the space station was as flight engineer for Expedition 28 and 29 that launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in June 2011. Following this mission, he will have logged 366 days in space across his 2 trips.
And to round it out, mission specialist Konstantin Borisov was selected to be a cosmonaut in 2018, and this was his first trip to space. He has a Bachelor of Economics from the Russian Academy of Economics, a Master of Science in Operations Research and Systems Analysis from Warwick University in Coventry, UK.
Estamos aguardando imagens lá da Estação Espacial Internacional para vermos então o momento da desacoplagem.
He has worked for companies such as Volvo and the Boston Consulting Group. He's also an experienced freediving instructor and an international freediving judge. He will end this mission logging 199 days in space. And we are just about a minute away from the expected undocking time. We're currently in the procedures to undock. We've already decoupled the umbilicals from the Dragon spacecraft and the space station.
Estamos aguardando as
And
imagens
the first set of 6
da
hooks of the
Estação
12 total
Espacial.
hooks have been
All
confirmed.
hooks are open.
And so we did just get that call that that second set of 6 hooks is now open. So to continue to walk us through the separation of Dragon from the International Space Station, let's toss it over to Leah Cheshire in Mission Control,
Dragon
Houston.
separation confirmed.
E temos a separação confirmada aí com a Estação Espacial Internacional às 12 horas 20 minutos pelo horário de Brasília. Pena que não tivemos as imagens, né, para vocês. Mas a separação foi confirmada, então, às 12 horas 20 minutos. Aí sobre o Havaí. Então, sobre o Havaí, no oceano, tivemos então a confirmação da separação. Aí a Dragon Endurance com a Estação Espacial Internacional. A separação então aí confirmada, né? Tivemos então aí, então eles deixaram então a Estação Espacial Internacional agora há pouco, às 12 horas e 20 minutos. É pena que não tivemos imagens aí do momento então da separação, né? A Dragon.
Again, at this time, the crew are all suited up and in their seats. They'll have an opportunity to get out of those suits shortly and prepare for their longer ride home.
Lembrando então que o splashdown vai acontecer amanhã de manhã. Nossa transmissão iniciando a partir das 5h25 da manhã, pelo horário de Brasília.
Again, the departure of Dragon Endurance this morning coming at 10:20 a.m. Central Time, 11:20 a.m. Eastern Time, as the International Space Station and Dragon were flying 260 statute miles over Hawaii. That means Jasmin, Andy, Satoshi, and Konstantin have completed their journey aboard the space station, wrapping up 197 days on the orbiting laboratory. By the time they splash down tomorrow, the crew will have reached 199 total days in space since their launch on August 26th.
Mas a confirmação foi feita então da separação. Então, após 6 meses na Estação Espacial Internacional, a CREW-7 então deixa aí a Estação Espacial Internacional.
Of course, we are still monitoring here. On the right side of your screen, you see Mission Control Houston, led by Flight Director Judd Freeling. This team continues to monitor the departure of Dragon until it's outside the approach ellipsoid. There's another milestone we'll hit before that. That's the keep out sphere. These are 2 invisible boundaries around the International Space Station that teams use to monitor arriving and departing spacecraft. Once Dragon Endurance exits the approach ellipsoid, it will continue moving toward its journey home, but the teams here in Houston will no longer be in joint operations with the teams in Mission Control Hawthorne on the left side of your screen. That team will continue monitoring the Dragon Endurance's journey itself, along with our 4 crew members aboard, and the team here on the right will remain working on International Space Station operations. And we're just moments away from depart burn 1. This is a short burn, about 22 seconds, and will continue to increase the distance between the space station and Dragon Endurance. As we stand by for Depart Burn 1, teams here in Mission Control Houston continue to monitor the departure of Dragon Endurance, and I'm going to send it back to my colleagues Jesse and Sandra to continue walking you through this process.
Thanks, Leah. As Leah mentioned, we are waiting for departure burn 1. That is expected to be about 5 minutes after undocking. The undocking procedure begins, which is 8:25 a.m. Pacific time or 11:25 a.m. Eastern time. And you can see on your screen a graphic of how this procedure works. We've already had depart burn 0, and again, are just waiting for depart burn 1. And that will increase the initial opening rate between Dragon and the space station.
We are about 20 seconds away from that depart burn 1 beginning. At this time, Dragon is 129 meters away from the International Space Station and continuing to get further and further away. Of course, we'll see that number grow following that departure burn as well. About 5 seconds away from that burn beginning.
Estamos então acompanhando então o momento acompanhamos, né? Agora há pouco então o momento da desacoplagem. Pena que não tivemos as imagens, né, lá da Estação Espacial Internacional, mas estamos iniciando então o momento da queima do motor aí da Dragon, né, para o afastamento aí da Estação Espacial Internacional. E foi concluída. Foi concluído então aí o momento então da queima do motor aí da Dragon, né, para o afastamento da Estação Espacial. Dentro de instantes, então aí iremos sair daquela esfera imaginária, né, que existe na Estação Espacial Internacional, né, que temos então 3 pontos, né, como vocês sabem, né, 400 metros, né, o ponto, que seria o ponto 0, 220.1 e 20 metros o ponto 2, né? Estamos aí então nesse momento saindo então dessa esfera imaginária então aí da Estação Espacial Internacional. Agora estamos acompanhando as falas aí então da tripulação da CREW-7. Então aí agradecendo aí por esse momento então de ter ficado, né, aí na Estação Espacial Internacional aí por esse tempo, né? 6 meses. Lembrando que amanhã, então, a partir das 5h25 da manhã, teremos então aí o momento do retorno e o splashdown.
Yes, Dragon, we're glad to have you aboard. We're going to be turning off the fasten seatbelt sign shortly, so you have that go for 4.012, and we're going to take cameras external.
Okay, copy, go for 4.012, and copy taking the cameras external. Thank you.
Agora, pelo horário de Brasília, são 12 horas e 28 minutos.
And on the big loop, Dragon has exited the keep-out sphere. Safe travels, CREW-7, and we'll see you at home.
E agora, então, eles saíram já da esfera, esfera imaginária então, da Estação Espacial Internacional, né? Já estão a mais de 400 metros, então, aí da Estação Espacial Internacional.
And so we did hear quite a bit of communication back and forth on the loops there from the ground, as well as between the International Space Station, Laurel O'Hara, who is remaining on board for a couple more weeks, and then NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli, who is the commander of Dragon, thanking Mission Control for their time in orbit and all the hard work that the folks put in, as well as saying that they left maybe a secret peanut butter surprise for Laurel on Space Station. We also did hear that Dragon exited the keep-out sphere. So This keep-out sphere is an imaginary sphere or a boundary which is 200 meters in radius around the International Space Station. It's one of several safety zones set up to govern visiting vehicles either arriving or departing the space station. Before moving into the keep-out sphere, spacecraft have to be configured where they would not cross the imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if the spacecraft
Lembrando que logo mais, então, a partir das 22 horas, teremos a segunda tentativa de lançamento para o veículo Kairos, aí da Space One,
which is another imaginary shape, this time a
diretamente lá do Japão.
ellipsoid measuring 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers in the same family as the keep-out sphere. One of the key differences with the AE is that vehicles outside of it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. That means the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours. Again, even if it lost all maneuvering. So we'll listen for that call out once we hear confirmation that Dragon is outside of the AE.
And we did also hear comms about the big loop being deconfigured after the approach ellipsoid is moved past. The big loop is a way for the crew in Hawthorne, California, which you see there on your screen, as well as Mission Control Houston, and the crew on Space Station and the crew in Dragon can all communicate on one big loop and have communications freely flowing between them. So we call this portion integrated operations, and once we do exit the approach ellipsoid, we will end those integrated operations. And we are expecting the approach ellipsoid exit in about 9 minutes or so from now.
Da manhã, então, com o momento do retorno e o splashdown. Não percam, hein? Só estamos, então, aguardando o momento, então, do encerramento da transmissão com a SpaceX e a NASA. Né? Mas, nesse caso, né, já podemos, aí, então, estar encerrando aqui também.
SpaceX Dragon on the cabin mic, comm check.
Né, infelizmente não tivemos imagens aí do momento então da liberação da Dragon Endurance.
We have you the same.
Mas foi confirmada às 12h20.
And on board Dragon, the crew is going to begin to work on getting out of their spacesuits for the journey ahead. They are splashing down early tomorrow morning, so they're going to get comfortable. They do wear those spacesuits during some of the more dynamic phases of the mission, such as launch, as well as docking and undocking, and of course, splashdown. But now that they have successfully undocked from the International Space Station at 8:20 Pacific, about 12 and a half minutes ago, they are able to get out of those spacesuits, get comfortable, maybe have a meal and just enjoy their last few hours in orbit.
Estamos então encerrando aqui a nossa transmissão em nosso canal UPTV. Logo mais então a partir das 22 horas. Nova tentativa então aí para Kairos da Space One e às 5h25 aí então o retorno e o splashdown da Dragon Endurance na Flórida e também teremos o lançamento do Electron a partir das 10h40 da manhã, nossa transmissão. Então aí, semana recheada ainda de atrações para vocês. Estamos só esperando também a confirmação para o dia 13, né? Aí mais uma missão Starlink. E também aí teremos dia 14 aí o teste integrado do Starship. Então essa foi a nossa transmissão em nosso canal UPTV. Nos vemos então logo mais à noite ou a qualquer momento, né? Então aí siga o canal nas redes sociais, lá no X e também no Instagram. Os links estão aí na descrição. Lembrando que você também pode ajudar o canal se inscrevendo, deixando o like na transmissão ou também, né, fazendo uma doação via Pix, né, para ajudar o canal e também aí na nossa wishlist do canal. Lembrando que em abril, né, faremos aí 3 anos de canal, né? Se você quiser dar um presente para o nosso canal, né, temos aí a nossa wishlist da Amazon. Né? Lembrando que em abril faremos 3 anos aqui no YouTube.
2 Russian Progress resupply ships, 84P and 85P, as well as 2 Crew Dragon spacecraft, carrying the Axiom 3 crew and Crew 6 home, as well as a Russian Soyuz vehicle for the MS-23 mission that returned NASA astronaut Frank Rubio to Earth following his record-breaking mission in which he broke the record for the longest single spaceflight by a U.S. astronaut. And just saying that is a mouthful, so I'm sure this crew is ready to be home after a very successful mission. We saw a lot of visiting vehicles, a lot of space station traffic, and in addition to that, they worked on hundreds of science experiments during their 6-month mission. And as we continue to monitor Dragon exiting the approach ellipsoid, I'm going to toss it back over to my colleague, Leah Cheshire, who's going to walk us through the next steps from Mission Control Houston. Over to you, Leah.
Thanks, Sandra. Now over 15 minutes since undocking this morning, and you mentioned science experiments. Let's talk about one of those. Over the last 23 years, crews aboard the International Space Station have completed thousands of scientific and educational experiments, and of course, Crew 7 added to that number during their 6-month
Aqui já
mission.
agradecendo a todos, né, pela audiência, pelos likes, pelos donates, então, e também pelas inscrições. Estamos chegando próximos aí por 1.300 inscritos no canal, né? Muito obrigado. Todos. Então nos vemos mais tarde à noite aí com a transmissão então da Space One com o foguete Kairos, diretamente então lá do Japão. Então desejo a todos uma ótima tarde e nos vemos então à noite. Você assistiu então ao canal UPTV com a desacoplagem então aí da CREW-7 na Estação Espacial Internacional.
As you mentioned, we are standing by for Dragon to exit the approach ellipsoid. That's the 2 by 2 by 4 kilometer invisible sphere around the space station, which we use to monitor arriving and departing spacecraft. That is monitored by the team in Mission Control Houston, and once they exit, we will be out of joint operations. Of course, this team continues to stay in the room and monitor all things space station 365 days a year. After joint operations are over, we do transition out of the big loop. This is the loop used for communications between all parties involved in the arrival and departure of Dragon. That means the space station, Dragon, Mission Control Houston, and Mission Control Hawthorne all on the same loop for easy and streamlined communications. We will take that down once they are out of this vicinity of the space station. And we previously heard Jasmin Moghbeli testing out the Dragon communication loops to ensure we had good comms there, and we did receive that confirmation. Jasmin Moghbeli, while aboard the International Space Station, conducted one spacewalk with her colleague Laurel O'Hara, who we heard some words from just shortly after Dragon's departure this morning. Again, that departure at 10:20 a.m. Central Time, 11:20 a.m. Eastern. Their spacewalk lasted 6 hours and 42 minutes. It was the only spacewalk conducted for crew members on this spacecraft. Again, standing by for Dragon Endurance's departure from the approach ellipsoid. This is the 3rd flight, and therefore the 3rd return to Earth for Dragon Endurance. It first flew on Crew 3 in November 2021. Then later again, almost a year later, Crew 5 launched in October 2022. And of course, for Crew 7, who is coming back to Earth today, August 2023. Crew 7 was the first crew in which all 4 seats were occupied by a member of a different nationality or a different partner country. Jasmin Moghbeli is our NASA astronaut aboard, joined by Andreas Mogensen of ESA, the European Space Agency. Satoshi Furukawa is from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, and Konstantin Borisov comes to us from Roscosmos. It was the first flight for Jasmin and Konstantin, and the second flight for both Andreas and Satoshi. And just a reminder that after we exit the approach ellipsoid today, we will wrap up our coverage on this broadcast and webcast. However, we will not be leaving you hanging. We're going to continue with some mission audio coverage all the way through the flight home for CREW-7. You can find that on nasa.gov and by searching our mission audio coverage on YouTube. Control Houston continuing to monitor the departure of CREW-7 and our 4 crew members as they prepare to rejoin the population of Earth tomorrow morning. With that, I'm going to send it back to my colleagues in Hawthorne, Jesse and Sandra, to continue walking us through Dragon's departure.
Thanks, Leah. Again, we are waiting for Dragon to exit the approach ellipsoid, or the AE, which is another imaginary shape. This is a 3-dimensional ellipsoid measuring 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers in the same family as the keep-out sphere. One of the key differences with the AE is that the vehicles outside of it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. That means that the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours, again, even if it lost all maneuvering. So we are just waiting for that call out for confirmation that Dragon is outside of the AE.
As we continue to stand by for that call out that Dragon has exited the approach ellipsoid. If you're just joining us, Dragon undocked from the International Space Station 21 minutes ago at 8:20 a.m. And we did just hear that confirmation that Dragon is now outside of the approach ellipsoid. That was the call we were waiting on. Again, that's another imaginary shape. It's a 3-dimensional ellipsoid measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers in the same family as the keep-out sphere, which was exited earlier this morning. One of the key differences with the approach ellipsoid is that vehicles outside it
and Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground. You have a go for your preparations for crew off duty at your discretion. We're ready to support in case you'd like to talk to Surgeon. And a reminder to set your audio destinations to ground.
SpaceX, Dragon on Dragon to ground. We copy all, and now we're going to configure for crew off duty.
Good repack, Dragon.
And those words from the ground up to NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli, letting them know that now that they're out of the approach ellipsoid, they can get configured for a crew off-duty period as they wait splashdown early tomorrow morning. The crew is going to get out of their spacesuits and get comfortable for the remainder of their journey. So again, the crew is now out of the approach ellipsoid, which means that the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours, again, even if it lost all maneuvering, and we call that a safe free drift trajectory.
And with that, now that NASA astronaut Jasmin Moghbeli, ESA astronaut Andy Mogensen, JAXA astronaut Satoshi Furukawa, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Konstantin Borisov have departed the International Space Station, it will take them about 18.5 hours until they make their way back down to Earth. The crew is currently doffing their spacesuits, or they may have actually completely gotten out of their spacesuits to settle in for the flight home. And today, Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of Florida at 5:50 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow morning, or 2:50 a.m. Pacific Time, on March 12th, followed by the crew getting picked up by sea by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels. As they rest up, our teams here will continue to keep an eye on the weather to ensure a safe return to Earth for Dragon and our CREW-7 astronauts.
And though our coverage here in Hawthorne is wrapping up for this morning, we will turn it over to the NASA team in Houston to take us through the next phases of the CREW-7 mission. Our friends at the Johnson Space Center will provide continuous live audio-only coverage along CREW-7's journey home until we rejoin from Hawthorne approximately 1 hour prior to splashdown. You can find the audio-only link by visiting nasa.gov/. .gov/live ISS.
Meanwhile, we will rejoin for live visual coverage starting roughly 1 hour prior to splashdown. And as always, you can find mission updates on X at NASA, at SpaceX, and on the web at nasa.gov. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again.